All right, we're live here at Buffalo Trace Distillery for another episode of Whiskey Wednesday. And today we have Master Distiller Harlen Wheatley and Marketing Director Chris Comstock of Buffalo Trace. What are we going to get into today, guys?
Well, we got a treat today, don't we, Harlen?
Yep, good stuff.
I'm going to talk about Blanton single barrel bourbon and Albert Blanton himself. It's kind of fitting that we're doing this tasting here in the Stony Point Mansion because Colonel Blanton built this after Prohibition. This is where he lived, right? He and his wife lived here for most of the second half of their life, and it still sits here on the property today. The mansion overlooks the distillery, and some of us have our offices up here. I've been working out of this building for almost 18 years now. Blanton's bourbon is something special to me because I knew Elmer for a while before he passed, and Elmer helped invent Blanton's bourbon. And he probably knew a lot of stories about Colonel Blanton. I mean, Colonel Blanton was a young man. He's from adjacent farm, right? He grew up here and he came to work at Buffalo Trace in 1897 and eventually became the president of the distillery in 1921. And we're really lucky that Colonel Blanton was in charge because he helped us navigate through some really challenging times. Like World War I,
Flood
of 1937, Prohibition, World War II. Thank goodness he was creative and a good businessman, because those were actually some of our better days. And coming out of that in the 40s and 50s were big decades for the distillery. So thank goodness for Colonel Blanton. And Elmer, like I said, knew Colonel Blanton, and he remembered when the Colonel would get samples out of Warehouse H to be tasted for single barrels for his own private use, for parties and events and gift giving. And Warehouse H is our metal-clad warehouse that Albert Blanton built with this theory, right, that the metal-clad warehouse would help age the barrels faster and better and differently than most bourbon barrels. What can you tell us about how that metal-clad warehouse and the dynamic works with aging Blantons?
We've been pretty lucky that through the evolution of the distillery, we've had a lot of different, buildings built and different, fabrication techniques. And, Warehouse H is no different because it was built with metal clad, and the metal clad is uninsulated. And one of the things it does is it breathes a lot easier. A lot of our warehouses, they're all different, which supports our variety. But a lot of our warehouses are brick and block, and they're really tight as far as airflow. And the consistency of a Warehouse H as it ages is really good early on in its cycle. So it goes hand in hand with Blantons, because typical Blantons is 6 to 8 years old, and it matures well in that warehouse.
And all Blanton's barrels are aged in that one particular warehouse, right?
Right.
So thank goodness for Albert for designing that, because we wouldn't have this taste profile, this brand at all, if it weren't for Warehouse H. So thank goodness for that. Elmer remembered Colonel Blanton picking barrels for his own use, and so then towards the end of Elmer's career in the 80s, he wanted to develop a brand to honor his former boss. And he named it Blanton's, and he came up with this very ornate bottle with a horse stopper to really elevate the bourbon and really glorify the bourbon, because Elmer always knew we made good whiskey here. And so that was in 1984, and we've been making Blantons the same way for the last 36 years.
Yeah, the package has stood the test of time. I mean, it's iconic. people recognize it. Been in movies. It's been all around the world. And the important thing is the bourbon hasn't changed inside. The recipe is the same. We test this and very consistent batch to batch, and the main thing is it's single barrel. I mean, they introduced that in 1984 for a reason, where they can focus on quality. It's all about the taste of the product, and you can have total control of one barrel at a time. So it's really, it's like I said, it's a timeless package. It didn't catch on that well right off the bat in 1984. I mean, Elmer used to say, you go around and talk about the single barrel bourbon and Blantons and how everybody should try it and educate people about it. But the feedback that he got was, who the hell's going to pay $25 for a bottle of bourbon? And
you could probably buy a bottle for $5 back in the 80s.
That's right. It was a commodity back then. And really what transpired was the beginning of premium bourbon. The beginning of what people thought was premium bourbon, and the sector, of course, the rest is history, because every distillery pretty much has a single barrel bourbon nowadays. So he was right, and I think the last auction price that we got for a bottle of bourbon was something like $35,000, something like that. So people will pay $25 for a bottle of bourbon. Elmer was right, in 1984. So.
Yeah, there's a bunch of questions on here already. We've got a lot of great questions. But Rich Keating says, I was able to compare an older Blanton's to a newer one and noticed a lighter, softer note in the newer one. Is that a single barrel?
Yeah. So throughout all this consistency, what we look for is kind of the backbone of those bourbons, and make sure that the taste is there and the quality is there. But they are all single barrel, and what that means is you can distill something today, put it in a barrel, and you're going to get variations due to the staves and the wood in that barrel, and that's the beauty of a single barrel bourbon, is the nuances between barrel to barrel, and being able to taste those, and that's the fun part about it.
Every barrel's different.
Every barrel's a slight,
same warehouse, same recipe, a little bit more rye in Blanton's than in our Buffalo Trace, but every barrel is made up from different oak trees, and they're all a bit nuanced, and that's part of the fun of it.
Yeah, another question that's relevant to that too is Ronald on Facebook asks, on average, how many bottles do you get out of a barrel for Blanton's?
After 6 to 8 years at 93 proof, which is what the original is bottled at, we get about 240 bottles out of a barrel. It varies, every barrel is unique, but typically 220 to 240 bottles.
Great. Yeah, and I think this is a good segue into, trying some of these whiskeys and these bourbons in front of you. Chad Black says, are there different versions of Blantons? I ask because I'm noticing different colored labels on these various bottles. Thank you. So Chad Black is asking about these 3 different bottles right here.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great segue, because that's the idea, is to offer different variations of the Blantons, and trying different proofs, different ages also. Some are 6, some are 8. And that's what we're going to taste today. We're going to try our original 93 proof. We're going to do the Blanton's Gold at 103.
Yep.
And then the barrel strength right out of the barrel.
Yep. So we get to taste 3 today, different proofs. The original is 93 proof, and this is what you'll find mostly if you're lucky enough to find a bottle.
So this is the one we're mainly used to having here in the United States, is this bottle here.
Yep, it's the original, the very first one, and it's typically what we've had here in the U.S. It just tastes like a great classic bourbon.
Yeah, it's a rye bourbon, and more made with corn, rye, malted barley, 93 proof. 6+ years old. Really, good balance, and a lot of tannins from the wood, but it's balanced with vanilla and sweetness, and it's a good all around single barrel selection.
And in warehouse H, because it's not insulated, it heats up and cools down every day. And during the Kentucky's 4 seasons, it's actually interacting with the oak more aggressively, right? So it's getting more flavor in those 6 to 8 years than typical, right?
Right. It like I said, you wouldn't want to put a 20-year-old bourbon in warehouse H because the it would be overaged. It would age too fast. But it's perfect for a 6 to 8-year-old bourbon, and good balance as it ages. It is 4 stories, so you get some variation on the stories, but generally pretty consistent for a 6-year-old bourbon.
And on the stoppers, there's a letter on the heel of these thoroughbred racehorses, and if you collect all the letters, it spells the brand name Blantons. But there's no difference in taste between the B and the L or the T, is there?
There's not any difference, and we don't hold back letters. We've been accused of holding back letters before, and it is completely random. But if you save them, each horse is a little different. The letter B is the beginning of the race. The letter S at the end is the guy winning the race with his hand up. So if you line those horses up, it's a complete horse race, which is pretty good, and it's also a good way to sell 8 bottles of bourbon.
It's pretty neat. Yeah.
Great. So we have, what's the next bottle we have here?
The one with the gold stopper is called Blanton's Gold. The gold edition is a little bit stronger, so we add less water to the finished product. It's 103 proof. A little bit stronger on the nose, a little bit more robust of a flavor.
Is that, Harlan, you think that's coming from the proof itself, or is there anything else that would make that taste a little different or on the nose?
Yeah, this is a good tasting because we're going from 93 all the way up to the barrel strength. And what you get is more flavor in that bottle. It's everything out of the barrel. So when you put 103 proof into the bottle, you're just putting more flavor into that bottle, and it's a good proof.
Yeah. Can we talk about the release here? I mean, where are these available? Which countries and things like that?
Well, for 30 years, Original has been available in the United States, and a couple of decades ago we did the gold and straight from the barrel for some other countries, but within the last few years, more and more people have been asking for the gold and the straight from the barrel, and so this summer we actually produced some for the United States. We've been planning this for a while. It takes 6, 7, 8 years to age the barrels, and so there's not nearly enough. We wish we had more, but at least there's a chance that you can find the gold edition in America this summertime, and we're going to do that every year. So if you miss out this year, next year we'll bottle some more gold for the United States.
That's exciting.
And yeah, it is. People have been asking, so that's why we're listening, and we bottled some up. And then the last one we'll taste is straight from the barrel, and this version is 132 proof, I think. And that will be available, in small quantities this fall. We only had a couple dozen barrels, and without any water, after the angel share, there's not a lot of bourbon to fill very many bottles. But we're going to continue to do that every year, and we'll continue to make more every year. So in the springtime, there'll be a release of gold, and every fall going forward, there'll be a release of straight from the barrel.
A lot of excitement, a lot of comments on that. Some folks here obviously hadn't heard that yet. It's the first time they've heard it is on this live, Facebook Live. So a lot of excitement based on that. So a lot of questions. Is Blanton's Gold sold in the U.S. and all these kind of things? So you just answered a lot of that for folks, all of those questions. What's so straight from the barrel? So is that always different? Is the proof always different because it is straight from the barrel, just based on that single barrel, correct?
Every barrel's different.
Yeah, they'll all be a little bit different. Typically after about 6 years in warehouse H, it'll be in the range of 130 to 140 proof. But they will vary a little bit. I have seen barrels come out of that warehouse at 145 proof or whatever, but it does depend on the barrel and where it's located, and the summers and the winters, and all those temperatures, humidities, and all those things.
What are you naturally going to get bigger flavor, right? More oak,
Definitely.
just unadulterated. It hasn't been watered down at all. So it's like drinking
Straight from the barrel.
Great bourbon right out of the barrel. Yeah.
Straight.
Yeah.
Hence the name, straight from the barrel. So lots of questions on availability and things like that, but we know we're expanding here at the distillery from the still house, the warehouses and all that. So maybe give us a little update on some of the progress on the expansion.
Yeah, we've talked a little bit on previous updates, but we talked about the still house that we're doubling, the warehouses that we're adding a warehouse every 3 or 4 months. We're building a new dry house. We're adding cooling capacity. We doubled our fermentation capabilities. We more than doubled our cooking capacity. And all this is designed to continue to produce more bourbons. We look back on Blantons, and we've produced 20 years ago, we were producing 18 times more Blantons today.
I remember when Blanton's was $40 on the shelf, and it was collecting dust.
Yeah.
20 years ago, and now you can barely find it, and it's a lot more expensive. But we literally have 18 times more barrels of Blanton's today as we did 2 decades ago.
And
there's a lot more. It just doesn't feel like it because it disappears so quickly.
But we are putting more out there, and we have a really long-term vision and plan to continue to grow and make more, and it's all about more whiskey for us. And we're putting our money where our mouth is and investing millions of dollars in our expansion to be able to do that.
Yeah, that's great because people love the brand, they love the whiskey, and they want more of it and more available, and so we do get a lot of questions about that. So I think there's no doubt that there's more coming every year. There's more and more, so that's great. And if they haven't seen it, they can look back at the older Whiskey Wednesday lives where we cover all those expansion videos. So any last thoughts? We usually try to keep this between 15 and 20 minutes. You guys are busy. Any last thoughts on the brand or what you're tasting or anything like that? And I'm going to go over some of these questions too in a minute.
I'm thrilled that people love it as much as we do. I mean, hopefully Elmer and Colonel Blanton appreciate what we're doing, and they respect the whiskey that we're still making today, and because really it's honoring them, right? And so every bottle of Blantons we make honors Albert Blanton, and if it weren't for him, we wouldn't be here. We'll continue to make whiskey.
Yeah, I agree with you. Elmer would be proud to see the state of the business and the state of Blantons and how we're taking care of the future, and all the people that work at Buffalo Trace Distillery work hard every day to make more whiskey and make more bourbon, and seeing that come to the market and people enjoy it, it's really satisfying, and we've got more to come.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's good news for all the Blantons fans, and for me personally, I love it too. So, well, thanks guys. There's tons of questions. Sorry we can't get to them all, but I feel like we covered it pretty good, and thanks for both of you being here.
Thank you.
Cheers.